My name is Mark Thompson, and after a decade on the police, I've seen the best and worst of humanity. The neighborhoods of Riverside are filled with their own stories, their own ghosts. Each street whispers secrets that linger in the air. But one particular night, those whispers turned into screams. I received a call that would haunt me long after I hung up the phone. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when the call came in, a report of a disturbance at a seemingly abandoned house on Elm Street. The caller was frantic, her voice trembling as she described shadows moving through the darkness of the home. "Please, you have to help. They're inside. He's in the hall." And then the line went dead. My partner Eric and I arrived at the scene within minutes. The house loomed before us, a run-down structure that had clearly seen better days. Its windows were dark, like empty eyes staring into the night, and the peeling paint seemed to writhe under the moonlight. I knocked on the door, my heart racing. Silence enveloped us, thick and oppressive, as we exchanged uncertain glances. The eerie stillness felt wrong, like stepping into a realm where time itself had forgotten to move. I could almost hear the house breathing, its creaks and groans echoing our trepidation. We stepped inside, the door creaking ominously behind us. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of neglect and decay, while shadows danced in the corners, teasing our senses. As we navigated through the dimly lit rooms, the emptiness was palpable. No furniture, no signs of life, just the cold, hard floors beneath our feet. It was as if the house had been stripped of its very essence. But then, something caught my attention. A faint scratching noise emanating from the far end of the hallway. My instincts flared. I motioned for Eric to follow me, our breaths shallow as we approached the source. We reached the end of the corridor, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The scratching grew louder, urgent, almost pleading. What could possibly be making that sound? My mind raced back to a childhood memory of a similar house, one I had stumbled upon as a boy. I recalled the feeling of being watched, a sensation that crept up on me as we stood in that darkened hallway. But it wasn't just the house that felt real. It was me. I had lost my younger sister in a tragic accident years ago, and every time I stepped into a place like this, I felt the weight of that loss settle deep in my chest. The shadows in the corners of my mind danced with the memories of her laughter, and I fought to push them away as I focused on the task at hand. Just as I was about to call out, Eric froze. His face had gone pale, and he pointed toward a wall. Deep claw marks marred the surface, as if something or someone had desperately tried to escape. Panic surged through me, and at that moment, the air shifted. A chill swept through the house, tightening around us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone. But when night fell, something inexplicable happened. As I stood there, adrenaline coursing through my veins, I heard Eric's voice tremble beside me. "Mark, we need to get out of here. This isn't right." His eyes darted around, searching the shadows as if expecting something to leap out at us. I knew he was scared, but I felt an overwhelming need to understand what was happening. I couldn't just walk away, not when I could sense that something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the house, jolting both of us into action. I gestured for Eric to stay close as we cautiously moved toward the sound, hearts pounding in sync. As we rounded the corner, we stumbled into a large, empty room, its walls covered in faded wallpaper that peeled like old skin. The shattered remnants of a chair lay scattered across the floor, and in the corner, a figure hunched over, shrouded in darkness. "Who's there?" I shouted, feeling a mix of dread and determination. The figure jerked up, revealing a woman with wild hair and wide, terrified eyes. Her clothes were tattered, and she appeared to be in shock. "Please, you have to help me," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "He's coming for me. He's been watching me." "Who?" I asked, stepping closer, my instincts telling me to trust her. "Who's been watching you?" She shook her head violently, as if the mere thought was too much to bear. "I don't know. I just know that he's here, in this house. He wants to take me back." Eric glanced at me, uncertainty etched across his face. "Mark, we shouldn't be here. We need to call for backup." Duh. But I couldn't tear my gaze away from the woman. There was something in her eyes that resonated with my own pain, a shared understanding of fear and loss. "What's your name?" I pressed, trying to ground her, us, in this chaotic moment. "Lisa," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I was just exploring the house. I thought it was abandoned, but then I felt him. Something dark, something alive." I could feel the weight of her words, the raw terror behind them. It reminded me of my sister's last moments, the panic that had gripped her before the accident. "What do you mean, something alive?" I asked, my mind racing. Suddenly, the room grew unbearably cold, and the shadows around us seemed to stretch and twist, pooling at our feet like a living entity. I glanced at Eric, who was now visibly shaken, his eyes wide with fear. "Mark, we need to go!" he urged, his voice rising in pitch. But before I could respond, a low growl reverberated through the walls, sending chills down my spine. It was primal, animalistic, and it felt as though it was coming from within the very foundation of the house. I felt Lisa's grip on my arm tighten, her nails digging into my skin. "We can't leave her!" I exclaimed, torn between my duty as a police officer and the instinct to flee. Eric's face hardened. "We're not equipped for this. This isn't just a disturbance. Something is wrong here, and we're out of our depth." I looked back at Lisa, who was now trembling, her eyes filled with an unsettling mix of hope and despair. "You don't understand. He'll take me if you leave. Please, you have to believe me." Just then, the growling intensified, and the shadows coalesced, forming a shape, an indistinct silhouette that seemed to pulse with malevolence. The air thickened, suffocating us in a haze of dread. I felt the ground beneath me shift, and for a moment I was back in that moment when I lost my sister, paralyzed by fear, unable to save her. But I couldn't let that happen again. "We're not going anywhere. We'll face this together," I declared, my voice steadier than I felt. As I stepped forward, the figure in the shadows seemed to recoil, and in that instant, I realized that our fates were entangled. The house, the darkness, and the fear, they all wanted something from us, and I was determined to uncover what that was, no matter the cost. "Stay close," I instructed Lisa and Eric, my heart racing as the tension thickened in the air. The mystery deepened, and I could feel the pull of something ancient and powerful, drawing us deeper into the nightmare that awaited us. As I stepped forward, my heart thundering in my chest, I felt the weight of the air shift. The shadows pulsed, and for a brief moment I could almost hear whispers, a cacophony of voices that seemed to echo from the very walls of the house. It felt as if they were dredging up memories I had buried deep, memories I had fought to forget. Suddenly, a flash of light flickered behind me, illuminating the room for a heartbeat. I turned, instinctively reaching for my flashlight, but the beam revealed something I hadn't expected. Eric was standing at the threshold, a strange expression twisting his features, like he was caught in a trance. "Mark," he said slowly, his voice unnaturally calm, "you need to listen to me." "Eric, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice laced with confusion. The shadows seemed to flicker and writhe around him, and I could feel Lisa's grip tighten on my arm, as if she sensed something was off. "Everything you think you know," Eric continued, his gaze distant. "It's all a lie. This house, it's not just haunted. It's a reflection of your fears, your past. It knows you." The ground beneath me felt as though it had been pulled away, and for a moment, I was suspended in a void. My thoughts raced to my sister, her laughter, her smile, the way she would tease me about being too serious. It had all been shattered the night I lost her. The weight of guilt crushed me. Could this house somehow be feeding off my pain? Had I brought this darkness upon us? "Mark, don't let it in!" Lisa's voice broke through, snapping me back to the present. But it was too late. I felt a cold finger of despair tracing my spine, an echo of my sister's final moments replaying in my mind. The accident, the frantic calls for help, the helplessness that had consumed me. "I didn't save her," I whispered, the truth clawing its way out. I could see Eric's expression shift, his eyes narrowing as if he were processing something profound. I couldn't help her. "Stop it!" he shouted, shaking his head violently. "You're not the only one who's been haunted, Mark. I've had my own demons to face. We all have." "What do you mean?" I asked, bewildered. "Remember the case? The one that went cold?" Eric's voice cracked, revealing a hidden vulnerability. "The girl who disappeared? I was supposed to protect her. She was my sister." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known his sister had gone missing, but I never connected the dots. "You never told me?" "Because I thought it would make me weak," Eric spat, his anger and pain colliding. "But this darkness, it feeds on our regrets. It knows us better than we know ourselves." As the shadows thickened and the growling grew louder, I realized the house wasn't just a backdrop to our fears. It was a living entity that thrived on our trauma. We were not just trespassers. We were the very essence of its nightmare. I felt Lisa's hand slip away as she stepped back, her expression shifting from fear to recognition. You're tied to this place. We need to confront it, or it will consume us." Just then, a deafening roar erupted from the shadows, and I knew something monumental was about to unfold. The darkness was no longer just a threat. It was a reckoning, and we were at its mercy. I had to confront not just the entity in the house, but also the ghosts of my past and the secrets I had kept buried for too long. "Together," I said, my resolve hardening. "We can face this." But as I spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was far more sinister than I had imagined, and the darkness was only beginning to reveal its true form. As the roar echoed through the darkened hall, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. The shadows seemed to thicken, swirling like a living entity, and I could sense the malevolence that wrapped around us, feeding off our shared pain. "We have to face it," I shouted, though my voice trembled with uncertainty. Eric and Lisa exchanged glances, the weight of the moment hanging heavily in the air. "What do we do?" Lisa asked, her voice barely a whisper, yet the urgency behind it was palpable. "Together," I reiterated, my heart racing. "We confront it. We confront our pasts." But as I said it, I could feel the darkness pushing against me, testing my resolve. It was as if the house itself was a predator, waiting to see if I would falter. Suddenly, the shadows recoiled, and an apparition materialized before us, an indistinct figure, shrouded in darkness. It shifted and contorted, taking on characteristics that were all too familiar. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, and then it hit me. It was my sister, her face twisted in agony, a mirror of my own guilt and sorrow. "No!" I cried out, stepping forward instinctively, but the figure lunged, reaching for me with a hand that felt like ice. "Mark!" it rasped, the voice barely recognizable. "You abandoned me. You let me die." "Stop!" Eric shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. He stepped between me and the apparition, facing his own specter that began to emerge. A girl whose face I recognized from the news articles, the one he had failed to protect. "This isn't real. You don't control us." The shadows writhed in response, the air thick with despair. I could feel Lisa's presence beside me, her fist clenched, ready to fight. "We need to stand together," she urged, her voice steadying me. "We can't let them win." With a surge of determination, I turned to Eric, meeting his haunted gaze. "We're not alone. We can take back our power." I reached for his hand, and he hesitated for a moment before grasping it tightly. In that instant, a strange energy surged between us, an unspoken understanding. We were bound by our grief, but also by our shared strength. As the darkness pressed in, I felt the weight of our collective pain, but also a flicker of hope igniting within me. "Let's end this," I declared, feeling the shadows recoil at my words. "We are not defined by our losses. We will not be consumed." The apparition of my sister shrieked, and I could see the fear in her eyes, a reflection of my own. I could feel the tears welling, but I forced them back. I had to face this. "I love you, but I can't keep living in your shadow." With those words, I felt the darkness shatter momentarily, the house trembling, as if the very foundation was cracking under the weight of our confrontation. The shadows howled, a cacophony of anguish and rage, but I stood firm, anchored by the presence of my friends and the truth I was finally willing to embrace. But in that moment of clarity, I sensed a shift. A darker force, hidden deeper within the house, stirred to life. It was far more powerful than I had anticipated, and the battle was only just beginning. I could feel the dread creeping back, a reminder that the true confrontation awaited us, and the outcome would define us all. As the shadows writhed in agony, I felt a surge of energy flow through me, pushing back against the darkness. The apparition of my sister screamed, her form flickering like a dying flame. I could feel the weight of my guilt, but it was no longer suffocating. It was a part of me, a scar that would always remain. I grasped Eric's hand tighter, and together we stood firm against the storm. But just as we thought we had gained the upper hand, the air thickened and a deeper darkness emerged from the corners of the hall. It was a swirling mass, more menacing than anything I had ever faced. I could see in its depths the faces of those we had lost, their eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and rage. It was as if the very essence of our grief had been summoned to confront us. "Don't look away!" Lisa shouted, her voice slicing through the chaos. I turned to her, and in that moment I saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had ignited within me. "We have to keep fighting." We pushed forward, the three of us forming a barrier against the encroaching darkness. But with each step we took, the shadows lashed out, striking at our vulnerabilities. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a phantom wound that tore at the very fabric of my being. I stumbled back, gasping, as memories flooded my mind, memories of my sister's laughter, of moments I wished I could relive. "Mark!" Eric called, his voice breaking through the haze of despair. I looked up to see him struggling against the grasp of his own spectre, fear etched across his face. "I can't hold it back." With a jolt, I forced myself to focus. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," I shouted, my voice echoing in the darkness. "We're fighting for everyone we lost." In that moment, Lisa stepped forward, her eyes locked onto the darkness with unwavering resolve. "You don't get to control us anymore," she yelled, her voice rising above the cacophony. The shadows recoiled, as if stung by her words. With a final surge of energy, we unleashed everything we had left, our pain, our love, our memories, into the heart of the darkness. There was a blinding flash, and then silence. As the light faded, I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. My body ached, and my heart felt heavy with the weight of what we had endured. I looked around, and Eric was on his knees, tears streaming down his face. Lisa, though trembling, stood tall, a beacon of strength amidst the remnants of the battle. But the victory felt hollow. The house creaked ominously, and I could sense that while we had quelled one darkness, there were still unanswered questions lingering in the air. The walls whispered secrets I couldn't decipher, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Is it really over?" Eric asked, his voice shaky. "I don't know," I admitted, glancing at Lisa. "But something tells me this isn't the end." As we gathered ourselves, I noticed a flicker of movement at the corner of my vision. A shadow slipped away, almost as if it was retreating into the very walls of the house. I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me. "Did you see that?" I whispered. But before either of them could respond, a low rumble echoed through the hall, shaking the ground beneath us. "Get out!" Lisa shouted, her eyes wide with fear. We scrambled to our feet, racing toward the exit, but as we reached the door, I caught a glimpse of something. A small, ornate box lying on the floor, half hidden in the shadows. My heart raced, a mix of dread and curiosity flooding my senses. What secrets did it hold? "Mark, come on." Eric's voice broke through my trance, and I hesitated only for a moment before sprinting after them, the box fading from view. We burst outside into the cool night air, gasping for breath, but the weight of what we had experienced lingered. The house loomed behind us, a silent sentinel of our pasts. We had survived, but at what cost? As I looked at my friends, I knew that our journey was far from over. The scars of our confrontation would shape us, but there was a new mystery to unravel, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lay ahead would test us in ways we had yet to imagine. And as I cast one last glance at the house, I knew that its secrets were not yet fully revealed. The shadows were still watching, waiting for their next chance to strike. As we stood there, breathless and shaken, the weight of our escape began to settle in. The night was eerily quiet, the air thick with the remnants of the darkness we had just battled. But even as I felt a flicker of relief, the back of my mind gnawed at me, whispering doubts that refused to be silenced. "What if it's not over?" I muttered, glancing back at the house, its windows like empty eyes watching us. Eric wiped his tears, his expression haunted. "We fought hard, but did we truly win?" Lisa shook her head, her jaw set with determination. "We have to be ready. Whatever that was, it's still out there, and it knows us now." As we turned to leave, a sudden gust of wind swept past us, carrying a soft, mocking laugh that sent shivers down my spine. I felt a chill run through me, as if the very air had changed. The darkness was still lurking, waiting for the right moment to reclaim its hold on us. I hesitated, glancing back at the house again. The ornate box I had seen before loomed in my memory, a puzzle I had chosen to ignore in the chaos. What secrets did it hold? What if it was a key to understanding the darkness that still clung to our lives? "Mark!" Lisa called, her voice pulling me back to the present. I looked at them, uncertainty swirling within me. We need to keep moving. But a part of me felt tethered to that house, to the shadows that had danced around us, taunting us with their presence. I nodded slowly, turning away, but the feeling lingered. A dark promise that this wouldn't be the last time we encountered the horrors of our past. We walked away, the path ahead, uncertain. But I knew one thing: the shadows would find us again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Share with your friends so they can also embark on this mystery-filled adventure. Leave a comment below, telling us your favorite part or what kind of ending you'd like to see in a future story.